Good morning. On the Encounter's behalf, welcome everybody, those who are here at the pavilion and those following us online. My name is Davide Bolchini. I'm the Executive Associate Dean at the Luddy School of Informatics, Computing and Engineering in Indianapolis at Indiana University, and I will moderate this event. We are grateful to have two distinguished guests today, which I will introduce briefly. Jon Stokes is a co-founder and chief product officer at Symbolic AI, a company that builds AI-powered tools for publishers. He also writes about AI at jonstokes.com. Jon is a software engineer and former CTO, and is one of the co-founders of Ars Technica. He has written a popular book on microprocessor architecture. Thank you for being with us. Jennifer Stron is the creator of several top science and tech podcasts for Newsroom that include ProPublica, The Wall Street Journal, and MIT Technology Review. Her latest show, Shift, was launched in 2023 and is distributed by Public Radio's PRX. She's been a keynote stage host and moderator at the United Nations General Assembly, South by Southwest, Web Summit, Bio, MTech, AI for Good Global Summit, the Future of Everything Festival, and many others. Thank you for being here. The topic of artificial intelligence has been center stage and Encounter for many years because it has been really become part of the fabric of our lives. When we look up for the New York Encounter programs on Google, when we navigate New York City on Google Maps, when we use social media, we are very well aware that AI engines are filtering for us lots of information among the sea of content that is out there and is already becoming part of how we interact with content and with people. But recently, the development of generative AI engines and platforms like ChatGPT or Stable Diffusion has really started to put on the front stage the possibility that these tools can create things, create content, generate content that we are used to create, that we used to create. And so the question is, what's the difference between what these engines do and what they create, and what we create, what we can generate? Is there a fundamental difference between the nature of this engine, of these tools, and how we approach the creative act, how we approach our work? And so to explore some of these questions, just to set the stage, I would ask very briefly, Jon, maybe to introduce what you do and how your current work intersects with the latest development of AI.
Yeah, so I work with journalists and professional communicators.
Mike.
Mike, is my mic not on?
Did they give you back that pack?
The mic?
Yeah, they gave me a...
it works.
Here I am.
Go.
All right.
Let's go.
Yeah, so I work with journalists and professional communicators, and the idea is that you bring your own notes, your own thoughts, your own notions, and you put them into generative AI, and AI actually pieces out the language and gives you this text artifact back that substantially represents what you intended to say, but you didn't actually type it out. And so I use retrieval augmented generation for this. I use large language models. I spend a lot of time with embeddings and thinking about like search relevance, stuff like this. Also, deploying large language models. And so this is basically what I spend most of my engineering effort and most of my brain power on. And also, I'm lucky that I get to work with expert users of language, editors and other writers. And I myself am an editor and a writer. And so we're able to evaluate the results of generative AI, like in detail, and in some cases live on the web, where the piece goes out and then readers interact with it, and you can sort of feel the limits of these models, not just in an abstract benchmark way, but in a way where people are trying to relate to them as an attempt to communicate. So
great. So Jennifer, as a journalist, you met with definitely many industry sectors to understand the impact of AI. So can you tell us about how your work intersects with this latest generative AI development?
Well, so as a journalist, I started my career, actually, I should say, I'm not a technologist. I studied politics, history, religion. I studied the things that I thought would help me with journalism, and I went, into this field in the 1990s. So I've been doing this for a little while, and sometime around 2016, 2017, I made a pivot from covering the intersection of public policy and impacts on society, how laws, the unintended consequences, things like that, to covering what we call frontier technologies. So the technologies that most people haven't really heard of yet. And so it was a lot of synthetic biology applications, things like that, AI, crypto, various other things. And, how does it impact now? I've had the great privilege to go in an experimental fighter plane and look at how AI is being used to train next generation Top Gun pilots. I've got the opportunity to go and see a lot of things. But we'll get into more of why. I'm not going to, if somebody thinks I'm being pessimistic, call me out on it, because I don't mean to, but I do think that I tend to be a little grounded in what I think of as, facts, what's really happening.
Thank you. So many people in these days are actually experimenting with generative AI. I remember, I think in these days, 1 year ago, we were talking with the Encounter organizer and some friends about for example, me working in academia already was receiving emails from students that use ChatGPT to send me emails, and people were asking, how do you know if they've been, who wrote those emails, right? And the essays, who wrote those? And so we were talking about how generative AI is kind of changing the way we work, the way we will work. But oftentimes we don't have a clear understanding of what these engines do and how they work, right? So I wanted to ask Jon, from your perspective as a software engineer, if you could use maybe some simple explanation to kind of make us all understand, under the hood, the generative AI engine, how do they do what they do? How do they give us that fluent content that comes up on the screen?
How much time do I have?
5 minutes.
Okay, all right. That was the real question. So I like the good professor earlier, I'm a little bit of a Platonist about this, and I can give an explanation that I think is useful, but there is much disagreement about what these things do. And this was when I first started to go back into this technology in 2021 and talk to researchers. This was kind of a little shocking to me, because I saw them trying to grasp what the model was doing and try to theorize and reason about it in a way that was like basically philosophical, and also, they were clearly confused. And it's amazing because they're there at the origin of this. They wrote the code that does this, and despite being a witness to the birth of it, we still don't understand it, and we have trouble even describing what a good explanation would look like at some useful level of abstraction, right? And so, I can concoct, like in Timaeus, a likely story, and ecos logos, I can say, maybe this is a likely story of how this works. But I confess it's just a likely story. So the likely story that I would give is to say that generative AI is a way of letting us use computers to discover numbers that to us as humans are interesting, are useful, are meaningful. It sounds like not that useful of an explanation, but if you think about it, every digital file is a number. This picture behind me is a number. It's just a large binary number on a disk somewhere. And we decode it through a codec, and it translates into something that seems meaningful to us. Somewhere on a hard drive, somewhere is a copy of Dune 2, which is to be released. That is a large number. That number is also on the number line. There's a little bit of a question of, like, do numbers pre-exist us? Like, we speak of the search for primes. Somebody searches for a new prime number. I'm hunting for something that already exists. There's the great internet Mersenne prime search, which is everybody gets their computers together and they all run through these algorithms and they try to find a new prime, as if this prime number existed on the number line, and then I applied computers to the process of discovering this prime number. I want to suggest that there's a copy of Dune 2 on the number line somewhere where all the characters have scales, or where all the characters have orange hair. There are multiple different kinds of copies of Dune 3 somewhere on the number line. There's a large number, a binary number, somewhere on the number line. If a prime number exists, then this number exists, okay? And that number decodes through the DVD codec or the 4K codec as a copy of Dune 2 with this variation. So what we do with generative AI is we train models to direct us to increase the likelihood that when we prompt them, we will land at a number on the number line, really a sequence of numbers. But I'm kind of collapsing space and time here. So at a number on the number line that we then take to be a meaningful digital object. Now that digital object, the interesting thing now is that a sequence of numbers or a very large number in terms of a file, you can plug this into a robot and you can do things in the physical world with it. You can plug it into like a CAD machine or like a CNC machine and you can mill a weapon or a toy or something like this. And so, but ultimately, I think that Gen AI is a search technology. It's a way that we search the number line for numbers that an astronaut riding a horse or something on the moon, something like this. We can put these concepts together. We can find a number that has those components that we interpret. We bring our baggage to that number, and we interpret it as this thing.
It's interesting the comparison with search that you made, because yesterday we were discussing the exhibit and giving the tour of the exhibit to some of the guests. And in one point of the exhibit, we made a difference between using Google, right, and using generative AI, ChatGPT. And Google, it seems like it works like a table of content on documents that already exist, and it kind of gets it for you, links it to you. And generative AI is impressive because somehow makes that content on the moment. The content conceptually is there somewhere in space, but it's basically concatenated in that moment. And what's impressive is that sometimes very accurate, sometimes it's not accurate, but it's actually very fluent. And so cannot make mistakes syntactically, maybe doesn't know what it's saying, but it's impressive how that content made up in the moment is accurate. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the search metaphor is great because many creative people, musicians, they experience creativity as a kind of search process. Somebody will say that this song came to me, or I discovered this piece of music or something.
It's like there somewhere.
It's like it pre-existed somewhere, and then you came across it, and it came through you. So
awesome. So Jennifer, thinking about big picture in your work, the various industry you interacted with. How do you see generative AI impacting the work of people, the society at large? We've heard a lot about lawyers using generative AI to brief about cases and find legal arguments, of educators. We have seen creative artists using generative AI with the implication that this has. So how do you see this impact evolving in these days?
Well, the easiest way I think to think about it at a societal level is that, Gen AI seemed to come from nowhere, which is not the case, right? It's actually older than we think for the most part. It's been going on, the work has been going on for decades. But sometime, about a year and a half ago, it flew onto the scene and inspired society. Suddenly, there was more interest in technology than I can ever recall, and just people had something interesting to create with, to play with, to capture their imaginations. And then, fairly quickly, like 6 months later, you had a man known as the father of deep learning, Jeff Hinton, quit his job at Google and come forward and say, I have real concerns this technology might, AI might actually end us, control us, take over society. And then you had folks like Sam Altman come forward and say, this stuff I'm building at OpenAI is so powerful, it's so important, it's so massive, it might end us, we have to be really, really careful. And by the way, you can get your enterprise version in aisle 5. It is, you don't want to know what's going to happen when your competitors get hold of it, so, buy now. And it was like the strangest industry, society pivot to like this weird marketing pitch, to me, But with industry using it, sure, yes, it's being used in sectors everywhere, all the places you described, but fundamentally, 2023, what this was about was a productivity efficiency tool. This was, in every sector, everywhere, a way to save time and save money. The end. We can write emails faster, we can search faster, we can sift through stuff faster. Yeah. There's not 100% there. Sure, drug discovery. That's an area where we have drugs in the pipeline now that were created with this technology. Yeah. And there are other examples, but I don't think we know yet. I think it's 2024, where it's just at the start of when we're going to start to see applications that aren't just this broad brush of cutting, I think.
So if we see generative AI kind of doing things for us, right? What I would say, it's able to do a first draft of anything to a certain point, right? To a certain level.
At least first draft of anything truly, if you're a writer, it can be for writing like a earthquake or a sports score or earnings. But we saw the film industry really step up and say, hey, you're going to cut our pay because you're taking away the part that is most unique to us and most valued about us. You're going to give us a first draft of a movie and then tell us just to make it good. And it's never worked that way. So rather than putting the tech on us, why don't you let us, the experts, tell you what we can do with this tech to be more efficient? And I think we're going to see a lot more of that going forward than we have going backward, where it's a first draft of everything, personally.
And some of the worries and concern that we see in the popular media are really about, is this technology replacing the work that we used to do, right? And or is it augmenting our abilities? This continuum between replacing our abilities or augmenting our abilities, and also transforming the way we do work, transforming jobs. We talk a lot about, for example, prompt engineering as a new kind of job that wasn't available necessarily a few years ago, given to generative AI. So how do you see, Jon, this kind of continuum between augmenting the abilities or replacing the abilities and transforming what we do?
Not to get all MBA, but I think that humans will sort of move up the value chain. Like work that I do as a programmer with Gen AI, I find myself reading code and editing code as if this were written by a junior programmer. If I'm a writer, I may find myself reading an outline from Gen AI or reading a summary or a first draft, the kind of thing that I might assign an intern to do. And so it can do these sorts of lower level service type tasks very well. But then it requires me to direct it, and so it augments me. And as the capabilities increase, I think it will continue to it'll be able to do more and more different kinds of things at a higher level of competence, and then humans will move up, sort of get promoted to higher levels of directorial position. It will replace some kinds of labor. It will replace some kinds of labor, like for instance, we were talking earlier in the green room about earnings call write-ups. Journalists maybe spend many hours in their career listening to earnings calls for that one quote or reading transcripts, and then now, that's with my platform Symbolic, not to give an ad, but you can just dump a whole transcript and a press release in there, and you can press a button, you get a really nice inverse pyramid news story that hits all the highlights and pulls out some pretty good quotes. That is a kind of work now that an AI can do that nobody in my field really wanted to do. You didn't want that gig, but then the flip side is doing all of that kind of trains you. It makes you better. And so I think that we may have a talent pipeline problem in the future because of Gen AI if it takes over the low-level stuff. But I'll be gone, you'll be gone. That's somebody else's problem. Not really. It's going to be all our problem. But it's worth thinking about.
And so, Jennifer, what's your response to these fears and opportunities as you have seen?
Yeah, I agree with him about the talent pipeline. And I think just because something will eventually work out where it benefits hopefully everybody, doesn't mean it starts that way. And that's been true in the Industrial Revolution. Going into a factory made us more efficient, but it didn't make us more human. It stripped away a lot of what made us human, the singing or the things that we might have done, right? And it took a very long time to get a wage that was fair, or to get more of the things that we now think about and take for granted. The moment that we're living in right now, I think we need to be respectful to people who are fearful, because this is about cutting jobs right now. This is about saving, long-term, augmenting, sure, and for some of us who are senior, augmenting, absolutely. But in this moment, we're not, that efficiency of time that we find and that extra money companies find, that's being used to be profitable. That's not being reinvested at this moment into these great projects that we've been thinking about for the last 5 years and haven't gotten around to. Now, people are warning about that. Great analysts and thinkers have all been warning, I'd say since probably middle of last year, hey, companies do not cut their way to greatness. So this is going to be ideas and things that will help you succeed, right, with this tech going forward. But we're not quite there yet. So if people are feeling fretful, it makes sense. Yeah. We're in a stressful moment. And we do have a talent pipeline issue where how do you get an investigative reporter? if you don't have a newsroom and you don't have that mentorship, that job, that on-the-job training. But also, by the way, for these models long-term, these models all stand on the shoulders of human productivity of generations and generations. So if the society loses access to reporters and journalism that it can trust, those models do too. And over time, what does that mean for them? And if artists can no longer afford to create the artwork that helps these models to grow and learn, I mean, there are computer scientists who predict that some of the models will eventually collapse because they're just like inbreeding and ingesting their same stuff in more generative AI in and generative AI out. And I don't know, I'm not a fortune teller, I'm just a journalist. So when it happens, I'll write it down. Or it doesn't happen. But I think there's so many open questions about the moment we're in and how that messy period of how we get from here to there, and reminding us all that we had to drive in a car before we knew we needed a seatbelt. So it's not like it's somebody's fault that we haven't figured everything out yet, because we haven't lived the moment yet to know what we need to do the next moment.
On the topic of big generative AI for journalists, and accuracy, of course, is a very big topic. And so the topic of hallucinations and understanding what these generative AI engine really know, if they know anything in the proper sense of the word, and how we can basically educate ourselves and others in understanding the mistakes and error, not taking information for granted. Right. So the topic of hallucination is very much on the rise. And so I was wondering, what is your experience in the work with hallucination, correcting, or understanding where something is very off? There was an article that just recently came out today on Ars Technica about Air Canada, who is being forced to pay back the ticket to a customer who was advised by a chatbot about the reimbursement policy that were not accurate with respect to Air Canada policies. So this is one of the many, many examples we see every day of people all over the society struggling with hallucination, and that has big implications. So I was wondering what was your experience?
The whole reason we started using AI to sift through lots of data and examples and all of this and look for patterns and pattern matching is because we as humans are not fabulous at that. And so now we're putting ourselves in a position where we've come full circle and we're having to take all this stuff and start looking through it, define the parts. And you know, as a journalist, if I'm looking through a stack of paper, I'm going to be wondering, is the math right or is this right? But a friend and colleague of AI researcher, Gary Marcus, AI generated books about his life and his work, and you could go hundreds of pages and be like, it's right. But he has a pet chicken in these books, and he does not have a pet chicken in his Manhattan apartment, to be clear. But Henrietta is very much in this stuff, buried way deep. And now it's like entrenched in the world. Gary Marcus has pet chicken Henrietta, and you can't really make it go away. So, you know, was I looking for the chicken? No. I happen to know he doesn't, but for everybody else, it just, like, what is the cost of the errors that slip through? Like, long term, what does it mean as these models train and you know, further entrench? And to remind you, everybody, that, like, AI is not a simple database. Like, if we decide to delete something that's not true after it's gone through this machine learning process, you can't really do that. Microsoft Research spent 7 months last year trying to see if it could help a model forget something, and it couldn't figure out how. So, okay.
And it cost, I think, over $1 million for ChatGPT to run and to serve this, this content. So these are open questions. How do you see the problem of hallucination in your work?
First off, I just want to say that I think that Gary Marcus's pet chicken story is delightful, and that is actually, now I want to read it. It's almost more interesting than the Twitter Gary Marcus to me. At any rate, hallucination is, I kind of think it's a feature and not a bug. For the first time, we have computers that can make things up, and they make up things that are plausible and that are interesting, and that are in some cases delightful and novel. And this is not a capability that we had before. So you kind of got to pick. Do you want the computer to invent things that are cool, or do you want the computer to just stick to what it knows? Which is it? You know, so this is that's the first thing I would say about hallucination. The second thing I would say about it is that, you know, as a journalist who has been using models to do some writing and some reporting, the machine makes up things in the way that journalists make up things. It'll say, insiders are saying, or, you know, right? And so these hallucinations, you're like, what insiders? You didn't talk to any insiders, bro. Like, there are no insiders here, but like, you know, this, and so, and I myself have had editors put in hallucinations into my pieces. And then sometimes there's a little negotiation that goes on. You're like, look, do I really want to call this guy on this? This is a cover package for a magazine. Like, am I going to burn this relationship? I'm just going to let this slide. No, that guy didn't actually say that. He has fixed the quote. The AI fixes quotes. And so, you know, sometimes you get a quote from someone and GPT-4 kind of cleans it up a little bit. Is that legit? If a human editor cleaned it up, it might slide. If an AI cleans it up, well, I mean, you know, okay, it wouldn't slide for you. It would slide at some outlets. So in some cases, I think in the era of like fake news, the hallucinations are coming from inside the newsroom. So, you know, this is, I don't know. I think it's more complicated than just, you know, the models make things up. Man, the people make things up. So.
Fair, and I will circle us back to a professor who teaches students how to litigate cases involving sexual discrimination and sexual assault, who now is associated with those words and himself appears to be accused by AI of committing these crimes and cannot seem to extract himself from that. So there's, yeah, I think truth matters. I don't know.
It does.
Yeah. Thank you. So, the very fact that this product, these tools, basically can replicate what we used to do just by learning from human example, by billions and billions of text and images, makes us wonder, is there anything irreducible in the human creative act, in human work, that when we use generative AI is still at play? Are we being reduced to computational efficient generator? Or is there something, is there a dimension in the work that we do? Because at any level, our work is creative in different levels. Mm-hmm. Anything that is irreducible to the most sophisticated AI engine. This is a question that is coming up from all sectors of society, many people. And I was curious to see your reaction, your response as you reflect on these tools. Jon, you want to start?
So I'm gonna be the contrarian here and say probably not. So I think I would phrase it this way. I would say that if your sense of your humanity is invested in your ability to manifest an artifact of certain quality, you are probably in trouble in the next decade. The AIs will make really stunning and convincing visual and auditory and textual artifacts that if you were to place them in a context and advertise them as being made by a human or a master, people would receive it and would have some kind of artistic experience, like the composer described, you know, in the video last night, some experience of sorrow or of joy or whatever, hearing some composition that was made by a machine. But, you know, maybe if they're told that this is made by a person and they receive it that way, they have this kind of transcendent experience, right? So I think if that is like what it is to be human, to be able to make a thing that is of a certain quality, then, well, you know, the jig is up. If humanity is in our relationships, if it's in how we intend towards one another, if a text artifact isn't just like a thing that I made for profit that's to be used in a certain way, if it's a thing that I mean towards you, that I intend towards you, and you receive it in some way, and we synchronize, like as a person to another person, that I don't think is in any danger from AI.
Interesting.
Except for the companies making AI girlfriends and some of the other things that extend out from there. But I would say I don't think we know the answer to that question yet from like a scientific kind of, there are other ways to answer that question, but from a nuts and bolts, write it down and improve it. One, we're humans, so we're probably not the best ones to say whether or not other things are like us. And we're not very good at separating out what we know versus what we believe, which if you're trying to define it that way, you might need to do. But I would back us up and remind us of a time not so long ago when like IBM's Big Blue beat Garry Kasparov at chess, And it caused an existential crisis because for a very long time, computer scientists had looked at chess as a measure of intelligence. It was a way to, look at and decide whether a machine was about to achieve human level intelligence. And so what did it mean? Was the singularity near? And after we calmed down a moment, no, that same computer that could win at chess couldn't win at checkers yet. So it also couldn't go do our laundry or make macaroni or, it's like tie some shoes. It just wasn't. And I would say that right now for this moment in generative AI, we're kind of in the same space where it's this really narrow slice of human, like what it means to live a human life and, be humanity.
Yeah.
Right.
Because on the one hand, this generative AI engine cannot exist without human creativity, right? On one hand, because they have been created by researchers and scientists who actually marveled at these inventions, that by computationally modeling language, these tools can produce something so fluent, right? That was a surprise and a wondrous surprise. And on the other hand, these tools are actually using human creative act, and ingest all the human creativity in terms of artifacts to learn from the structure, right? And so it seems that human creativity is also at the center stage to make these tools possible, to make this tool happen.
Sure. And even 5 years ago, we were still questioning whether a machine could be creative at all. So do we know what 5 years from now looks like? No, we don't. Not yet, I don't think.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? If you had to reflect with maybe an open question that you have in your work as you talk to people about the future of AI and the future of us. What's a burning question you have on your mind? Jon?
I guess my burning question is OpenAI going to release something that destroys my startup? but apart from the purely mercenary, I will just say what I worry about is people that, to the point of AI girlfriends and VR, that forsake human connection for a kind of world of their own construction, are choosing inside VR or with Gen AI, that just kind of are able to chase whatever appetites that might drive them, at liberty, seemingly without any kind of consequence or check from reality, and that isolate themselves. This is, I think some people will isolate and some people's minds will kind of bifurcate and leave, the collective. And then there are those of us that'll try and maintain real connections and relationships. And in some cases, maybe use some Gen AI to augment those. The promises for translation and for other kinds of other kinds of work. There's a story that you can tell about Gen AI where it maximizes communication bandwidth. People whose languages may be awkward, who are bad at putting together linguistic constructs, can sort of get their ideas through with generative AI, and so it can be a communication aid. But I worry about it maybe becoming an obsession or an end in itself, a way that people escape and grow further apart.
It reminds me what you're saying about the Eliza effect of the 60s, that already some early chatbots were so fluent that actually people started to believe that they were sentient beings, right? People we can interact with, and that could change the relationship. And so the perspective that these are tools which are very powerful, but they are actually at the service of a soul at work, we would say. A greater mind is actually a constructive perspective. So.
During the pandemic, I spent time covering people using Replica for companionship. And I will say, for one professor in particular, his companion texting him all day long was very realistic, and had been trained on him for years. And so from the social sciences point of view, it's well, this is a person who otherwise was deeply depressed and alone for a year. How terrible is it? And on the other side going, oh my gosh, this is a very deep relationship with something that isn't there. But going back to those open questions, my biggest one, I trade in questions more than answers, again, journalists. So my biggest question, the largest companies driving all this change, they are not making any money. So, and that's fine. Silicon Valley does that a lot, where they lose money. But at what point, like, what is the business model? There's my question, because they will not be sustained permanently off our $20 when we decide to give them $20. And it's really hard to make the case in a lot of cases for these enterprise versions, which just don't differentiate enough from the free version to make it worth it. I think at one point, it's been about a year ago, like OpenAI was spending $700,000 a day just on like power and training. So, you know, at what point will there be some money in this? And what happens if there's never money in this? Will it just, you know, what does that mean? I think another thing that I'll be watching this year will be a shift both to seeing this become more useful beyond just an efficiency tool, to see people begin to create those differentiating types of applications by sector. And I think we're going to see more of what we saw last year with like the Actors Guild standing up for themselves. People in San Francisco sticking cones on self-driving cars to shut them down in their tracks because they had them driving circles in their cul-de-sac and they didn't feel safe with their kids or dogs. I think we're going to see more people just saying, okay, technology is great, but what's the purpose and who does it serve and why is it here and how do not put it on me so much as let me interact with it, I think, will be one of the big trends to watch.
Great. So I want to invite everyone also to visit the exhibit on the 5th floor on AI, Work, Wonder, and Create. And I want to extend our thanks to our guest being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one important announcement. The Encounter is a little bit big miracle in the heart of New York City. It's a place for all those who seek belonging. So we invite you to give generously at the donation table outside this auditorium or in a couple of clicks at the New York Encounter/donate. Your donation is tax deductible. Please join me in thanking the speakers once again. Thank you.
Thank you.